When Luis watched his white moonlight kill me with his own eyes for the 99th time, I finally gave up completely. I no longer longed for his love, I only wanted to finish the mission, marry him, and go home. So when he tried to persuade me once again in the hospital to forgive Celine, I merely nodded. He froze, and only after a long while did he continue. Celine was just afraid you didn't truly love me, so she kept testing you by killing you. Let her kill you one last time, and then we'll get married. He dropped to one knee. Miranda, you can revive, so just this last time. This is what I owe her. I let out a bitter laugh. It was his debt, yet I had to repay it with my life. I would revive, but I would still feel pain. Suppressing the surging pain and despair in my heart, I spoke softly. Then arrange this death at our wedding. Chapter 1. Luis froze, as if he didn't understand what I had said. He gripped my hand tightly, a rare struggle appearing on his face. But the wedding is the most important day for us. I chuckled lightly. Isn't that exactly what she wants? To kill me at my happiest moment and prove my love in the most extreme way. She'll be at ease, and I'll get what I want. Finish the mission, then go home. As for the pain, I was already numb. I'm sorry for putting you through this. I promise this will be the last time. He whispered in my ear, just as gently as when he had killed me before. I closed my eyes. Compensation bought with 100 deaths, I don't want it. From that day on, Luis devoted himself fully to preparing the wedding. He acted like a perfect groom, personally overseeing every detail. But only I knew that at the same time, he and Celine were planning how to take my life at my own wedding. While taking wedding photos, Celine drove Luis away and gently touched the tiny diamonds on the wedding dress, the jealousy in her eyes undisguised. Miranda, you're the cheapest woman I've ever seen. To keep Luis, you could even agree to something like this. She looked at me, her eyes full of mockery. But you know what? Luis and I discussed for a long time what music should play when you die. He said we must choose a song I like the most. My nails dug into my flesh, the pain keeping me barely conscious. That's good. She seemed disappointed that she didn't get a stronger reaction from me. She curled her lips and left. On the night before the wedding, Luis brought me a pair of diamond earrings. Wear them tomorrow. Celine said this style is pretty. He instinctively tried to hug me, but I stepped back and put distance between us. Go to bed early. I closed the door. Leaning against the door, I slowly slid down to the floor. The 100th time. No matter how painful, this would be the last time. On the wedding day, the hall was filled with guests. I wore the heavy wedding dress and those earrings, like a carefully dressed puppet. Luis looked at me, his eyes briefly dazed. Celine sat in the front row in a striking pink dress, a smile lingering on her lips. The host recited sentimental lines. Luis held my hand, his palm slightly damp. Miranda, do you take Luis to be your husband? I looked at Luis, and my voice held only relief. I do. The moment the words fell, a sharp pain shot through my earlobe, followed by a violent current surging through my entire body. The intense pain made me lose balance instantly, and I crashed heavily onto the cold floor. The guests gasped. Someone tried to step forward to help, but Celine shouted sharply to stop them. Don't move. This is the apology gift the couple prepared for me. The current pierced my heart again and again. My vision began to blur. Luis stood in place, fists clenched, but he did not step forward. Just endure a little longer, Miranda, he said softly, his voice trembling. It'll be over soon. Celine crouched down and leaned close to my ear. He wanted to change the method last night. He said seeing you in pain makes his heart hurt. She chuckled. But I told him the last time must satisfy me. The current suddenly intensified, and I couldn't help letting out a cry of pain. Luis suddenly took a step forward, but Celine glared him back. Luis, you promised me. Luis stopped and turned his face away. Chapter 2. As my consciousness gradually blurred, memory surged up. The first death, Celine pushed me down the stairs. At that time, I had only just arrived in this world, believing that sincerity could move Luis. The 17th death, I was locked inside a freezer and frozen to death. That was the first time I begged Luis to spare me, and also the first time I understood that my death was something he had tacitly allowed. The 50-second death, I was trapped in a fire and burned alive. That time, for the first time ever, Luis cried after I died. I thought he finally cared about me. Later, I learned that he was only worried that I might not be able to revive again, that I wouldn't be able to complete the agreement of 100 deaths with Celine. The electric current gradually weakened, and my breathing became labored. Celine frowned in dissatisfaction. The voltage isn't even strong enough to be fatal. Luis crouched beside me. With difficulty, I grabbed his sleeve, instinctively pleading. Save me. Luis's face turned pale instantly. Celine shoved him aside and stepped hard on my hand with her high heel. Miranda, don't you dare try to escape. Luis, do it. Do what we agreed on last night. Luis hesitated for a moment, then bent down and wrapped both hands tightly around my neck. Luis, harder. Celine's voice pierced through my fading hearing. You promised she would die once at the wedding. You promised me. The pressure on my throat suddenly intensified, and tears slid uncontrollably from the corners of my eyes. I wasn't afraid of death, my heart had already died. For the 100th time, he finally did it himself. As my consciousness scattered, I suddenly remembered the freezer incident. He had tricked me inside. I had hoarsely begged for help from behind the door, while he left with Celine. The despair back then was exactly the same as now. Just when I thought everything was ending, the suffocating sensation suddenly vanished. I collapsed on the floor, coughing violently. He released his grip and stood there, pale-faced. Celine, his voice was hoarse, there are too many people here. And the way she looked just now. Celine's face darkened instantly. Have you forgotten that I once saved your life? I'm doing all this for your own good. He saw the clear finger marks on my neck. His eyes struggled, and finally he said in a low voice, I haven't forgotten. I just think this is too easy for her. He said it as if trying to convince himself. Celine's eyes lit up. Luis, you're right. Death isn't a punishment for her at all. She excitedly looked around, then picked up a glass of champagne and slowly poured it over my head. Didn't you say you were willing to die 100 times for Luis? Then let's see how much you can endure for him. Luis swallowed. Fine. I'll do whatever you say. He looked at me, his tone much softer. Miranda, endure it. Then we'll get married. Chapter 3. Silently, I wiped the wine from my face. My throat burned, and even swallowing was difficult. Celine smiled and had someone bring strong liquor. She soaked a towel in it and suddenly pressed the dripping cloth hard against my neck. The excruciating pain made me scream. I tried to break free, but my body was firmly pinned down by the bodyguards. Luis's body visibly stiffened, his fingers curling. I bit through my lip. Darkness flashed before my eyes. Does it hurt? Celine's voice was delighted. This is only the beginning. Through tear-blurred vision, I looked at Luis. He turned his head away and only spoke after a long moment. That's enough. We stop here today. Celine stared at him in disbelief. Luis, you're yelling at me for this cheap woman? You want me to let her go? Fine, fine. Then I'll leave. She made a move as if to run away. Luis immediately panicked and grabbed her. Celine, don't make a scene. Am I the one making a scene? You're the one who can't even keep your promise. Celine cried out, pounding her fists against his chest. Luis held her tightly, coaxing her in a low, pleading voice. I'm sorry, Celine. It's my fault. Don't be angry. He looked at the crying Celine in his arms, then glanced at me, and finally made up his mind. Bring me a knife, he ordered the bodyguard. Celine complained tearfully in his arms. Luis, you're not allowed to feel sorry for her anymore. I won't. Luis's voice rang out clearly. I will never go soft on her again. A bodyguard handed him a dagger. Luis took it and gripped it tightly in his hand. Miranda, this is the last time. After this, we'll live a good life together. Celine leaned against him and softly urged, Luis, hurry up. The guests are waiting. Chapter 4. I looked at the knife in his hand, then at his face, the face I had died for 99 times. The place on my throat where I had been strangled still hurt. The skin burned by alcohol reminded me of the humiliation just now. The 100th time. So when the heart dies completely, even tears cannot come out. I suddenly tugged at the corner of my mouth, trying to smile, but it pulled at the wound on my neck and turned into a suppressed gasp. Okay. I heard my hoarse voice. Go ahead. Louis seemed not to expect my calmness. His brows furrowed almost imperceptibly, but quickly relaxed again. He held the dagger and walked toward me. Memories flashed uncontrollably. The 73rd time, Celine tricked me into an abandoned elevator shaft. I fell in the darkness, the sound of bones breaking painfully clear. When Louis found me, his hands were trembling, yet he told Celine, "Don't play something this dangerous next time." The 81st time, he personally fed me cake laced with poison. My stomach twisted in agony as I convulsed on the carpet, while he comforted Celine beside me until I stopped breathing. He stopped in front of me, looking down from above. "Miranda," he suddenly called my name in a low voice, "close your eyes. It'll be quick." Celine snorted in dissatisfaction. I looked at him and did not close my eyes. "Louis," I used all my strength, yet my voice was as light as a sigh, "there won't be a next time." His pupils shrank slightly, as if he wanted to say something. But Celine had already lost patience. She shrieked, "Louis." Louis's gaze sharpened. Without hesitation, he suddenly exerted force with his wrist. Intense pain exploded from my heart, and rapidly spread through every limb. I lowered my head and watched as blood quickly dyed the white gauze on my chest red, like a strange and dazzling flower. Louis released his hand, the dagger still embedded in my chest. He stepped back, his face somewhat pale, subconsciously avoiding my gaze. Chapter 5. But I no longer cared. I was finally going home. A cold mechanical voice from the system sounded in my ear. "The 100th mission is complete. Detecting the host's vital signs have disappeared. Soul link is being disconnected. Goodbye, my love." I thought that when I opened my eyes, I would see the system space or my rented apartment. But no. In my sight was the magnificent ceiling of the wedding hall, the crystal chandelier swaying and hurting my eyes. What's going on? Did I fail? Sorry, host. There was an issue during the disconnection of the soul link. You must remain in this world as a soul for 5 more days. We will fix it as soon as possible. As compensation, we will add 1 million per day as a retention fee to be paid together with the final bonus. After understanding, I breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, I could still go back. I floated in midair, quietly watching everything below. My corpse still lay on the ground, a dagger in my chest. Blood soaked the wedding dress, sticky and cold. Louis's face was covered in blood, yet he looked relieved. Chapter 6. Miranda, he called my name tentatively, his fingers touching my cheek. It's finally over. I prepared a spare wedding dress. When you wake up, we'll continue. He held my corpse in his arms, his expression gentle. But half an hour passed, and my body showed no change. It remained completely still, even gradually losing its warmth. What's going on? Aren't you supposed to? He didn't finish his sentence, but I knew what he meant. Wasn't I supposed to revive? Celine rushed over, her voice filled with deliberate surprise. Why hasn't she come back yet? Louis looked stunned. He lightly patted my cheek, his movements turning from gentle to restless. Miranda, stop playing. It's time to wake up. His fingers were smeared with the half-congealed blood on my face, sticky and thick. My soul floated above, watching this absurd scene. He was like a child waiting for an alarm clock to ring, unaware the battery had long run out. Celine shoved him aside and grabbed my corpse. Stop pretending, Miranda. You're still pretending. You want to make him feel guilty with this trick, don't you? Get up. She pulled my arm hard, tugging at the dagger in my chest. Dark red blood slowly seeped out again. Celine, don't touch her. Louis grabbed her wrist, a trace of panic in his voice that he might not even have noticed himself. She really doesn't seem to be reacting. What's wrong with that? Celine shook him off, her tone resolute. She's just pretending. Didn't she drag it out for a long time in the fire before? Maybe she just wants you to feel sorry for her, or maybe she was badly injured this time and needs more time. She hooked her arm through Luis's and softened her tone. Luis, the guests are watching. Let's deal with the situation first. Luis looked at my lifeless body, his gaze struggling. He waved his hand, his voice sounding tired. Clear the hall. The bodyguards and the stunned host began guiding the guests out. The vast wedding hall quickly fell silent, leaving only them and me lying in a pool of blood. He bent down and carried me in his arms. My body hung limply, my head resting weakly on his shoulder. He carried me to the lounge next door and placed me on the sofa, his movements stiff. The white wedding dress against the crimson blood was especially glaring. Celine stayed close, continuously analyzing my supposed scheme. Luis, don't be fooled by her. She's using this to make you feel guilty. She's being shamelessly persistent. Luis didn't respond. He sat in the armchair opposite, staring fixedly at me on the sofa. Chapter 7. He was waiting. Waiting for a miracle he had grown used to. Time passed second by second. The blood on my chest slowly coagulated into a dark brown. My complexion gradually shifted from pale to a lifeless gray. His brows furrowed tighter and tighter, his fingers unconsciously picking at the armrest. Something's wrong, he murmured, as if asking himself. Before, it's never taken this long. Celine immediately leaned closer and hugged his arm. Let's wait a little longer, Luis. Maybe this time is special. You promised to go to the musical with me tonight. The tickets are already booked. Besides, she loves you so much. Even after dying 99 times, she still came back to keep being a simp. How could she not come back this time? He looked at her, then at my motionless body on the sofa. His Adam's apple bobbed, and in the end, he nodded. All right. Just like that, he left me alone in the cold lounge and walked away with Celine. The moment the door closed, the room was filled with dead silence. My soul followed them. At the restaurant, Celine smiled sweetly as she cut steak and fed it to him. Louis seemed unable to taste the food. His gaze drifted out the window from time to time or toward his phone screen, as if expecting some kind of message. Louise, Celine put down her knife and fork in dissatisfaction. You're still thinking about her. She's died 100 times already. This time won't be any different. No. He denied it immediately, forcing a somewhat stiff smile. I was just thinking about the aftermath of the wedding. Chapter 8. That night, they still went to the theater. The magnificent stage, the moving music, yet Luis could not sit still. Midway through, he suddenly stood up and whispered to Celine, I'm going out for some air. Standing in the cold wind outside the theater, he dialed a number over and over again. It was my phone. It should be lying beside my corpse in the lounge. The tone of unanswered calls rang again and again. Finally, Luis couldn't take it anymore. He drove back from the concert hall to find me. He moved my corpse back to our marital bedroom. He placed me on the bed, trying to arrange me into a slightly more natural posture, but the stiffness of the corpse made his efforts futile. He sat by the bedside, holding my hand that had already begun to stiffen. Miranda, he said softly, in a tone almost coaxing, stop sulking. Wake up. Celine said this is the last time. From now on, we'll live well together. He reached out to brush the hair stuck to my cheek, but the moment he touched the cold skin, his fingers curled and withdrew. My soul watched indifferently. His promises came too late, and were far too light. The next day, the changes were more obvious. My skin had completely lost its elasticity, a waxy yellow tinged with bluish gray. Stiffness spread throughout my body. A faint, barely perceptible strange smell began to fill the room. Luis came in very early. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, clearly he hadn't slept well all night. He approached the bed and leaned down, studying my face carefully. He stretched out his hand, his fingertip hovering before my nostrils for a long time. No breath. His face paled, and he straightened up abruptly. What's going on? His voice was hoarse. The smell. Celine entered carrying breakfast. Smelling it, she immediately fanned the air in disgust. Ugh, what is that smell? Luis, let's go out to eat. This place is unlucky. Wait a little longer. As if triggered, his voice suddenly rose, full of agitation. She'll wake up. She has to wake up. Celine froze from his shout, a trace of secret delight flashing in her eyes before she quickly concealed it and softened her voice. All right, we'll wait. Luis, don't be anxious. Chapter 9. The third day. The smell could no longer be ignored. The stench of decay stubbornly lingered in the room. My cheeks had slightly sunken, my lips dry, cracked, and dark, slightly parted. The skin around the dagger in my chest had darkened, faint green patches beginning to appear at the edges. Luis barely left the room. His hair was messy, his shirt wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot. Celine brought food and water, urging him to eat. He didn't even look. Luis, Celine said cautiously, it's already the third day. Could it be that she really? Shut up. Luis suddenly turned and glared at her fiercely. She won't. She just needs time. Celine shrank back, startled, but still muttered softly. But she's already like this. Luis, isn't it good if she's dead? We can finally. I told you to shut up. Luis grabbed the glass on the table and smashed it to the floor. Shards scattered everywhere. His chest heaved violently, his eyes chaotic and savage. Get out. Celine's face turned pale. She dared not say another word and hurried out. The room was left once again with him and my corpse. He breathed heavily. His gaze returned to me, the fierceness gradually replaced by helplessness. He stood up, staggered to the bedside, and stared at my already deforming face. Miranda, his voice trembled with desperate questioning. How long are you going to sleep? Get up. The fourth day. Luis was in worse condition. He seemed to have aged several years overnight. Stubble covered his face, his eye sockets sunken. He no longer shouted, he just sat there in silence. Sometimes his gaze was empty, sometimes locked onto me with an almost insane obsession. Celine no longer dared enter. She only glanced from the doorway, fear and a trace of hidden satisfaction on her face. I looked down at Luis. He seemed to sense something, or perhaps he could finally no longer deceive himself. He practically lunged to the bedside, staring blankly as if he didn't recognize the ugly body on the bed. A few seconds later, as if all strength had been drained from him, his knees gave way, and he fell heavily to the floor beside the bed. No. Chapter 10. He shook his head, his voice broken. He tried to reach out to hold me, but when he saw the swollen, discolored body, his hand hung in midair, trembling violently, and finally fell weakly to clutch the blood-stained bedsheet. I shouldn't have let her treat you like that. I shouldn't have strangled you, shouldn't have used the knife, shouldn't have watched her torture you. He repeated shouldn't again and again, every word soaked in despair and regret. It hurt, didn't it? I know it hurt. Every time, I knew. He cried so hard he could barely breathe. I just wanted you to stay. I wanted to prove you would love me no matter what. I'm a bastard. He suddenly raised his hand and slapped himself hard several times, the sharp sound echoing in the room. I love you. I do love you. He repeated the sentence, as if clutching the last straw, but his voice grew lower and lower, drowned in sobs. Come back. Please come back. I'll promise you anything. I'll never see her again. We'll leave this place. Please. His repentance and tears surged, sincere and overwhelming, yet they could no longer reach me. Crying, he suddenly lifted his head, his bloodshot eyes staring fixedly at my corpse. Miranda, are you punishing me? He muttered to himself, his fingers trembling as they reached for my cheek. You must be angry, right? Angry that I made you wait too long. Angry that I didn't see the truth sooner. As if grasping a lifeline, a strange light suddenly lit up in his eyes. Yes, you must be angry. That's why you're deliberately not waking up. He suddenly stood and paced beside the bed, steps chaotic. What should I do? What do I do for you to forgive me? His gaze swept across the room and finally landed on the dagger still stuck in my chest. It's Celine. He stopped, his eyes turning fierce. It's all her fault. If she hadn't kept pushing you, hadn't kept provoking you, we would have been happy together long ago. He rushed out of the room like a gust of wind. Celine was sitting on the sofa in the living room, leisurely painting her nails. Seeing Luis rush out, she immediately put on a sweet smile. "Luis, you're out. Are you hungry? I'll ask the servant." Luis didn't respond as usual. He walked straight toward her. The smile on Celine's face froze. She instinctively shrank back. "Luis, what's wrong? What's wrong?" Luis repeated, his voice low and dangerous. He suddenly reached out and grabbed her by the throat, lifting her off the sofa. Luis growled, veins bulging in his hands. "You kept forcing her. You killed her again and again. If it weren't for you, why wouldn't she wake up? Why would she be angry at me?" Celine's face instantly turned red, her eyes filled with terror and disbelief. "Luis, let go," she forced the words out. Luis sneered, madness in his eyes. "I should have let go long ago. Let go and let a vicious woman like you stay far away from us." Dragging the struggling Celine, he headed toward the villa's basement. My soul floated behind, watching coldly. The basement was cold and damp, filled with dust and mildew. Luis threw Celine hard onto the concrete floor. She coughed violently, tears and snot covering her face. "Luis, you're crazy. For that cheap woman?" Chapter 11. Before she could finish, Luis kicked her in the stomach. Celine screamed and curled up. Luis crouched down and grabbed her hair. "She's 1,000 times better than you. 10,000 times better. She died for me 100 times. What about you? Besides manipulation and forcing me, what else can you do?" Celine's face turned pale with pain, her eyes filled with fear. "No, that's not true. Luis, I love you. Everything I did was because I love you. I was afraid she'd take you away." Luis laughed wildly, as if hearing the greatest joke. "Your love is slaughtering her in front of me again and again. Your love is making me stab a knife into her heart myself." His laughter stopped abruptly. "Since your love is so cheap and vicious, then you should taste the bitter fruit you planted." He stood up, looked around, and found a roll of rough rope in the corner. Celine realized what he was about to do and crawled backward in terror. "No, Luis, I know I was wrong. I'll never do it again. Please spare me." Luis ignored her. He brutally tied her hands and feet with the rope. "When Miranda died every time, she must have hurt 1,000 times more than you do now," he muttered. "You owe her." Luis held the knife that had killed me. Celine's pupils shrank as she struggled violently. Luis walked up to her, crouched down, and tapped her cheek with the cold blade. "Tell me, when Miranda was electrocuted, was she this scared? When I strangled her, was she this desperate?" Chapter 12. Celine shook her head frantically, crying hoarsely. "Luis, please. Spare me. I was wrong. I really know I was wrong. I'll give Miranda back to you. Make her come back to life. Please." Luis's eyes instantly turned violent. He raised the fruit knife, its tip glinting coldly in the dim light. "Tell me, if I do to you everything you did to her, will she calm down? Will she be willing to wake up?" "No." Celine let out a shrill scream. The knife plunged down, not into a vital spot, but into her thigh. Blood burst out instantly, dyeing her light-colored pants red. Celine's scream echoed through the narrow basement. Luis seemed unable to hear. He pulled the knife out, staring at the flowing blood with an almost obsessive focus. "This is to repay her," he said softly, then raised the knife again. The second stab. The third. My soul floated in the air, quietly watching the bloody scene. There was no pleasure, no sympathy, only complete numbness. All this love, hatred, and violence would soon have nothing to do with me. After an unknown amount of time, Luis finally stopped. Celine lay on the ground, covered in blood, no longer breathing. Luis threw away the blood-soaked knife and staggered to his feet. He looked at Celine's corpse with no expression, as if staring at a pile of garbage. "Miranda, look, I avenged you. Can you wake up now?" No one answered him except the distant sound of sirens drawing closer. Perhaps the servants had called the police. Or someone else. A group of officers rushed into the basement and restrained the already deranged Luis. He did not resist. He simply laughed foolishly. "Miranda, I'm coming to find you." Unfortunately, that was only his delusion. Whether in life or death, we would never have anything to do with each other again. After he was taken away from the basement, retention time ended. Soul link repaired. Beginning transmission. #Chapter 13. The system's cold notification finally sounded. I felt a powerful pull, as if my soul were being drawn into a vortex, and I took one last look at that world. Luis was still standing there, muttering to the air, his face twisted with expectation and madness. At his feet lay Celine's gradually cooling corpse. Goodbye, this nightmare that lasted 100 times. When I opened my eyes again, the familiar ceiling came into view. Outside the window came the sound of car horns and the faint cries of street vendors, full of the breath of everyday life. I sat up abruptly and looked down at my hands. Slender fingers, healthy skin, no wounds, no bruises. My heart beat strongly in my chest. I was back. Truly back. The room was quiet. Half a cup of cold coffee sat beside the computer desk. Everything was exactly the same as when I left. As if the long and painful 100 cycles had been nothing more than an overly vivid and cruel nightmare. I took a deep breath, stood up, walked to the window, and pushed it open. The cool evening breeze brushed my face, carrying the city's noise. Street lights were already on, pedestrians hurrying below. My phone chimed, a transfer notification. The money was enough for me to live without worry. Being alive now was enough. Everything was over.